The old silver sedan coughed black smoke into the bright afternoon air as it rolled into the luxury car auction parking lot, sounding like it might collapse before reaching the gate. The faded paint was peeling from the doors, one headlight was cracked, and duct tape held the rear bumper together like fragile stitches on a wounded soldier. People turned to stare. Some laughed openly. Others lifted their phones to record the embarrassing sight of a rusted junk car crawling between rows of million-dollar supercars shining under the blazing daylight sun. But no one laughed louder than Celestine Voss. The billionaire heiress stood beside her pearl-white hypercar in designer sunglasses, surrounded by reporters and investors, radiating the cold confidence of someone who had never heard the word struggle in her life. Her sharp smile widened as the battered sedan stalled directly in front of the VIP entrance. The driver stepped out slowly, exhausted eyes shadowed by sleepless nights, wearing grease-stained jeans and a worn brown jacket. In the back seat, a little girl no older than 8 clutched a backpack decorated with hand-drawn stars. Celestine glanced at the car and smirked as if she were looking at garbage dumped onto marble floors. She had no idea the engine hidden beneath that rusty hood was worth more than every luxury car at the auction combined. Before we continue this emotional story, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Wisdom Story House, if you believe kindness and second chances can still change lives. Your support helps more heartfelt stories reach people who truly need them. The man's name was Garrick Vale, and life had not been gentle to him. Every wrinkle beneath his tired eyes carried the weight of loss, sacrifice, and years spent trying to keep promises he once made to someone he loved. The little girl in the back seat was his daughter, Nara, the only light left in his darkened world after tragedy shattered their family 3 years earlier. Since losing his wife during a sudden illness they could never afford to fully treat, Garrick had spent every day balancing survival and fatherhood like a man walking a tightrope over an endless canyon. Most people saw only a poor mechanic driving a dying car. They never saw the nights he skipped dinner so Nara could eat properly. They never saw him sleeping on workshop floors after 12-hour shifts fixing engines that belonged to men who wouldn't even look him in the eye. They never saw the trembling exhaustion in his hands as he tucked his daughter into bed every night, whispering apologies to a future he feared he could not provide. The sedan itself looked pitiful, but it carried memories more valuable than gold. It had once belonged to Garrick's father, a brilliant engineer named Roland Vale, a forgotten genius who spent decades designing revolutionary engine systems before powerful corporations stole his ideas and buried his name. Roland died with empty pockets and a broken heart, leaving behind only notebooks full of impossible designs and one unfinished prototype hidden inside the rusted shell of that old car. After his father's death, Garrick promised himself he would someday complete the project. But life crushed that dream beneath bills, grief, and survival. Until 6 months earlier, when Nara became seriously ill. The diagnosis arrived on a rainy afternoon like a death sentence wrapped in polite medical language. She needed an experimental treatment their insurance refused to cover. Garrick stared at the number printed on the hospital estimate until the paper blurred beneath tears he refused to let his daughter see. It was more money than he could earn in years. That night, while Nara slept beside a flickering lamp in their tiny apartment, Garrick opened his father's dusty notebooks for the first time in over a decade. What he discovered changed everything. Roland Vale had designed an engine unlike anything the automotive world had ever seen. It was compact, nearly silent, capable of producing extraordinary power while consuming a fraction of normal fuel. The design was decades ahead of its time. Garrick spent every spare hour rebuilding it in secret using scraps from junkyards, broken machinery, and old tools inherited from his father. His fingers bled. His back ached. He slept barely 3 hours a night. But piece by piece, the impossible machine came alive beneath the hood of that ruined sedan. The luxury auction was his final gamble. Word had spread that the world's richest collectors and automotive investors would gather there that afternoon. Garrick didn't belong among them, but desperation gives courage to people who have nothing left to lose. As he walked toward the registration table carrying a small metal case containing his father's engine blueprints, whispers followed him through the crowd like cold wind. Expensive suits turned away from him. Valets laughed under their breath. Some thought he was homeless. Others assumed he had entered by mistake. Celestine Voss watched the scene with detached amusement. She was famous not only for her fortune but also for her ruthless business empire that dominated luxury technology markets. Her family company bought struggling innovations, stripped them for profit, and discarded the inventors behind them. She had grown up surrounded by wealth so enormous it disconnected her from ordinary suffering entirely. When Garrick requested permission to demonstrate his vehicle, several organizers nearly refused on the spot. Only the possibility of public entertainment convinced them otherwise. A rusty junk car attempting to compete against elite engineering was too ridiculous to ignore. Under the blazing daylight sky, spectators gathered around the old sedan expecting humiliation. Garrick's hands shook as he opened the hood. The laughter slowly faded. Beneath the rusted exterior sat an engine unlike anything anyone had ever seen. The polished metal shimmered with elegant precision. Complex handcrafted components fit together with impossible beauty, humming softly like a sleeping animal. Even experienced engineers stepped closer in confusion. Celestine removed her sunglasses. For the first time that afternoon, her expression changed. Garrick explained the design quietly, his voice carrying years of buried pain and determination. He spoke not like a salesman but like a father fighting for his child's future. Every sentence honored the man who created the engine and died forgotten by the world. He described fuel efficiency numbers so unbelievable that several investors accused him of lying. Then someone requested a live demonstration. The crowd moved outside. Garrick slid into the driver's seat while Nara watched nervously from the passenger side clutching her stuffed rabbit. The old sedan rolled toward the test lane beside vehicles worth millions. Cameras flashed. Reporters smirked, expecting disaster. Then Garrick pressed the accelerator. The sedan exploded forward like lightning. The sound was not a roar but a smooth, terrifying surge of power that stunned everyone into silence. The rusted car flew down the track faster than machines designed by billion-dollar manufacturers. Dust spiraled behind it in golden clouds beneath the afternoon sun. Digital timers blinked wildly as engineers checked readings twice, then 3 times. A shocked silence swallowed the entire event. The impossible had just become real. When the sedan returned, people no longer laughed. They stared. Celestine stepped forward slowly, her expression unreadable. For the first time in years, she looked genuinely unsettled. She demanded to inspect the engine personally. Garrick hesitated but finally agreed. As she leaned over the machine, recognition flickered in her eyes. She had seen similar sketches before. Years ago, buried deep within archived company acquisitions, her father's corporation had purchased rejected patents from a struggling engineer named Roland Vale. The company dismissed the ideas as impractical and discarded them. Yet now the living proof stood before her, humming beneath battered steel. Guilt pressed against her chest unexpectedly. For the first time, Celestine realized her empire may have destroyed a genius. Investors surrounded Garrick almost instantly, throwing absurd offers into the air. $1 million contracts appeared within minutes. Executives who mocked him earlier suddenly smiled warmly and extended business cards. The same people who laughed at his poverty now begged for his attention. But Garrick cared about only one thing: Nara's treatment. As the chaos grew louder, the little girl quietly wandered away from the crowd and sat alone beside the parking lot curb, overwhelmed by the noise and attention. Celestine noticed her by accident. The billionaire approached cautiously, unsure why she suddenly felt drawn toward the child. Nara looked up with tired eyes too old for her age. She spoke softly about her father, about how he worked every night until his hands shook, about how he promised her things would get better even when he was crying alone in the kitchen. She explained how the car was special because her grandfather's dream lived inside it. Something inside Celestine cracked. She remembered her own childhood suddenly, cold mansions, distant parents, endless luxury without warmth. She had spent her entire life surrounded by wealth yet starved of love. Looking at Garrick and Nara, she saw a bond stronger than every fortune she possessed. For the first time in years, shame entered her heart. That evening, after the auction ended, Garrick sat alone outside the hospital where Nara received treatment consultations. The setting sun painted the city in orange light while exhaustion weighed heavily on his shoulders. He held several contracts in trembling hands, each offering more money than he had ever imagined. Then a black luxury vehicle stopped beside him. Celestine stepped out quietly without cameras, security, or reporters. She looked different somehow. Smaller. Human. She admitted the truth about her father's company and Roland Vale's stolen legacy. Her voice carried regret instead of arrogance. She confessed she had spent years chasing success without understanding the people crushed beneath corporate greed. Meeting Garrick forced her to see what money could never buy. Then she handed him a folder. Inside was an offer unlike the others. Not ownership. Partnership. She wanted to help build the engine exactly as Roland dreamed, with Garrick leading the project under his father's name. She also quietly included complete medical funding for Nara's treatment with no repayment conditions attached. Garrick stared at the papers in stunned silence. After years of humiliation, poverty, and heartbreak, kindness felt almost unbelievable. Tears filled his eyes as he looked toward the hospital windows glowing against the darkening sky. Months passed. The revolutionary engine transformed the automotive world. Roland Vale's name finally appeared in magazines, technology conferences, and engineering textbooks across the globe. Garrick became respected not because of wealth but because he refused to surrender when life tried to destroy him. But the greatest miracle happened inside a small hospital room on a bright spring morning. Nara's treatment worked. The little girl who once sat weak and frightened in the back seat of a broken sedan now ran laughing through green parks beneath warm daylight skies. Her cheeks regained color. Her smile returned brighter than ever. Garrick watched her with silent gratitude every chance he got, knowing there had been nights he feared he would lose her forever. Celestine changed too. She began rebuilding her company with ethics her father never valued. She funded programs for struggling inventors and opened scholarship foundations for children of low-income mechanics and engineers. People called it a public image transformation, but those closest to her knew the truth. A rusty junk car and a little girl's honesty had saved her soul. And sometimes, late in the afternoon, Garrick still drove the old silver sedan through quiet streets with Nara beside him, the revolutionary engine humming softly beneath the hood. The car looked just as battered as before. The paint still peeled. The bumper still rattled. But now, when people looked at it, they no longer saw junk. They saw hope. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House. Stories like this remind us that behind every struggling person may be a hidden miracle waiting for someone to believe in them. And before this story ends, special request, comment below where you are watching from and share one moment when kindness changed your life forever. Because sometimes the world laughs at broken people without realizing they are carrying greatness beneath the surface. And sometimes, the most valuable thing in the world is hidden inside what everyone else calls worthless.